What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Is it wise for the Dbacks to go with a six-man rotation? And whether they do or don't, should Jordan Montgomery be locked in as a D-back starting pitcher?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. On today's podcast, want to react to everything we've seen the first couple days of spring training, pitchers and catchers, of course, reporting to camp. So we want to talk about the new mindset that this D-backs team, not even a new mindset, but a mindset that we've seen the D-backs transition to over the last couple of years. And we're finally starting to verbalize the words of what our mindset is going forward. So we're going to talk about that in segment number one, discuss if Jordan Montgomery should be locked into a rotation spot and whether or not it's wise for the D-backs to go with a six-man rotation. So a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about today. So let's get right into it. We're going to start the podcast off by discussing that mindset I hinted at. Mike Hazen, he did a little press conference this week. Of course, everyone's happy to be back at camp. You could see baseball is right around the corner. We're starting to get anxious, excited, and Mike Hazen discussed going to this season. The D-backs focus is not on development. Yes, there's still a lot of young players, guys like Corbin Carroll, Gabriel Moreno, right? Guys in the lineup, in the rotation, guys that we saw last year, the Yober Diaz, Blake Walston, Christian Mena. We want all those guys to get better and become the best version of an Arizona Diamondback they can be. But Mike Hazen is being very clear, very direct. It is not about development. That was 2021. That was 2022. After what we saw this D-backs team can do in 23, the mindset has shifted and focused. This is a team determined and focused on winning. Hazen and Torey Lovullo are not going to go out there and coddle guys anymore. Like we saw in 2021 and 22 where the D-backs were not a very good team. And there would be moments where it's like, why do we continue to play this guy even though we know he's not good? Is because at the time we wanted to see if they could turn into anything, right? When you continue to play Corbin Martin and JB Berskakis and Alberto Castellanos and all these guys who we knew weren't good at the time, despite them being young, we had to play them because of a quote-unquote potential aspect, right? You had to see what you had in those young players that you have. And now, a couple years later, we know who's good among our youngsters. We know, we cut the dead weight. And now moving forward, the D-backs are focused on winning. We're not just going to sit around and just wait on guys to develop anymore. If you're not out there and you're not producing, you're probably going to go to the bench, the minor leagues. You might get cut. You might get traded. This is a new day in Arizona. And just a couple years ago, when I first took over the podcast in 2020, there were so many players on this roster who were getting opportunities who we knew just weren't good enough. And entering 2025, there are players on this D-backs team who we know is good, who we are not even sure what their exact role is going to be, or at least the D-backs are still being coy about their role, right? You look at a guy like Justin Martinez. We all know, every D-backs fan knows he should be the closer. He was the best option last year when Paul Sewald went down. He was the guy out of all the other options that stepped up the most. But the D-backs have yet to commit to him this spring training, this camp, because of that commitment and focus on winning. They are making sure they leave no stone unturned, and they're going to do all their evaluations, and give everyone a realistic chance, a realistic opportunity, even though they may be leaning just Martinez 80% right now for the closer. They just want to exhaust all their options this camp, and that's what they're doing with the whole roster. No one is just being given a job. Everyone has to earn their job, their opportunity, and that's what I love to see. A guy like Jordan Lawler, we all want to see him on the major league level. We're all ready for him, right? But the D-backs are basically saying, if Jordan Lawler is not ready to play right now, we're not going to mess around with trying to develop him and get him opportunities despite, maybe having more ready-made guys right now. Like long-term, Lawler might be better than Geraldo Perdomo. But right now, Perdomo is a winning baseball player, and even other guys on the bench, right? If we had Kevin Newman entering this season, it's easy to justify playing Kevin Newman over Jordan Lawler if he's just more major league ready right now. I think up and down this roster, that's what we're going to really see in 2025. If you're not producing, you are going to be out of there. I look at guys like Alek Thomas, who we know, defensive monster, right? Got one of the best gloves, one of the best instincts in center field of anyone in Major League Baseball. But that bat, that offensive profile has yet to come around. He has struggled at the plate through his first 3 seasons. And so now we enter 2025. Got Gurriel, Carroll, Jake McCarthy, Randall Grichuk. You got 4 outfielders you at least feel very good about offensively and defensively. And yes, Thomas might be the best of that bunch defensively, but his offense is so much further than anyone else in that group. If he does not at least close the gap a little bit, it's hard to justify playing him at all. Same with other dudes on this roster. Pavin Smith, right? He is coming in to replace a Jock Peterson. We have guys like Adrian Del Castillo, who potentially could be really good offensively. If Pavin Smith goes out there and struggles after that nice sample size he had last year, if he struggles this year, Pavin Smith could be out there too. Same with the rotation. I'm looking at the Montys. I'm looking at the Erods. Your leash should not be that long. This is a D-backs team that is ready-made. Your rotation is loaded. Your lineup is loaded. Your bullpen is loaded. According to FanGraphs, they think this could be the best pitching staff in baseball next year. We're projected to have the best ERA plus from the rotation to the bullpen in Major League Baseball next year. And that means the D-backs can't have any dead weight. According to the Picada projections, we're projected to at least make a wild card spot. And the D-backs are not going to make it there by playing guys who are still in the development phase of their career or guys who are just straight up not producing. And Mike Hazen, Torey Lovullo has talked no more doing that. We are focused on winning over development, and I love that message from the D-backs, and I think they have moved in that direction over the last couple of years. We've seen them cut the dead weight like mad bums. The Jace Peterson, some other guys who have struggled over the last couple of years. There has been a focus and a commitment on winning through this D-backs organization. That philosophy changed over the last couple of years. I'm excited to see it continue and be emphasized in 2025. Now we'll discuss if Jordan Montgomery is a lock for the D-backs rotation because he believes so in segment number 2. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell variety. I don't have to get messy and crack everything open. Don't have to get that stuff on my hands. I can just eat the no-shells. They got lightly salted. They got roasted and chili. They have so many fantastic flavors. And I'm eating pistachios all day long and hitting my protein intake for the gym. So if you want to do the same thing, get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right. Back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, let's discuss Jordan Montgomery and if he should be a lock for the D-backs rotation because so far positive, I guess, reports coming out of camp on Jordan Montgomery's at least conditioning entering this offseason and camp. Of course, Ken Kendrick has had a lot of comments for Jordan Montgomery on the radio, talking about how it was a big failure. It was on him. And Jordan Montgomery had a pretty respectful answer when being asked about the comments and everything, because Monty basically said, hey, I'm the youngest of three brothers. I'm used to name calling and, having to get into it with those guys. So he said it just kind of like rolled off his back. He was not worried at all about the comments. And so that makes you feel good about Jordan Montgomery entering the season. Yes, you have to imagine your owner, the person who signs your paychecks, telling you you're not good at your job. That does have to affect you a little bit. But as long as the people in the locker room, Torey Lovullo empowers him, as long as Mike Hazen and all the guys in that rotation, the bullpen, as long as they empower Jordan Montgomery, it's a big way for him to get his confidence back. And Monty knows he was terrible last year. And that's why coming to camp this year, he really focused on getting better in shape, because, of course, that seemed to be the talk of town last year. A lot of slander toward the weight of Jordan Montgomery last season, and rightfully so, right? Like, he was clearly not in shape, overweight, and it affected him, right? How many times did he go out there and say, man, when it's hot, it's just tough to pitch? And it's like, I don't know, guy, we're in a dome. And so for Jordan Montgomery, we're hoping he gets better next season. He has talked about how he came into this camp 20 to 25 pounds lighter. He said he shed about a dumbbell's worth of weight, and he knows in Texas he was heavy, but it wasn't really affecting him. But getting to the D-backs last year, he said it really was a struggle for him to go from like mound or go from like pitching to mound. He said it felt like farther than ever, and he didn't want like his body movements to feel that stiff, to be that difficult. And so he felt like he needed to lose the weight to be more loose, to be more agile. And so we'll see if shedding the weight actually helps his performance entering next season, because there are cases, right, where guys lose weight are not as good. That was kind of like the CC Sabathia thing, where it's like, maybe we want you thick, CC, because you don't seem to have that oomph behind you when you're a little bit thinner. Maybe the true is same for Jordan Montgomery, but he doesn't rely on velocity the same way CC Sabathia did. Jordan Montgomery is a guy that wants to be sinker ball heavy. He wants to induce contact, get ground balls. And last year, the velocity definitely wasn't there on a sinker ball, only around 92 miles per hour. The year prior, it was closer to 93.5 miles per hour, but it still should justify his batting average allowed on the sinker going from 249 to 374, the slugging allowed going from 366 to 577. And so for Jordan Montgomery, we're hoping the extra weight can lead to a greater output production, because his sinker ball, his go-to pitch last year, was just not effective. And maybe the lack of velocity, maybe him being out of shape was a big reason of it. So hoping him coming to camp a little bit healthier can add a little bit more velo on those pitches, maybe add a little bit more spin, because he has not really tweaked or worked on like his arm delivery or his mechanics. It's mostly about getting in better shape. So we'll see if that ends up helping his performance this year, because Monty is talking like he's not worried at all about his rotation spot right now. And I think he should be. Jordan Montgomery has said the D-backs are paying him a lot of money, and he doesn't see or envision himself not being in this D-backs rotation coming opening day. And so far, the tea leaves make it seem like he will probably be in the rotation, but we are still evaluating everything, because that's what the D-backs are, of course, doing, focus on winning, not development. So it sounds like he is probably going to be in the rotation, but we still want to look at all our options. But for Jordan Montgomery, the fact that he just feels like he's going to be there just because of his contract and salary, like, it was the kind of comments that kind of like rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Like, if I'm Jordan Montgomery and I came off a season where I was terrible, all the fans hate me, my owner ripped me in the media, and I come into the next season, I'm just like, yeah, I know I was bad, out of shape, and everyone hates me, but I just feel like I'm going to be in the rotation. I just feel like my spot's guaranteed. Like, as a professional athlete, you probably should never feel that way, right? Made me feel like Jordan Montgomery doesn't have that fire in his belly. He doesn't have that dog in him. Like, whatever cliche you want to say, it just kind of left me wanting more. If you're Jordan Montgomery, like, what I wanted to hear you say is, yeah, my job's not secure. Like, why should it be? Ryan Nelson was fantastic last year. Brandon Pfaadt pitched the whole year and was solid. We just signed Corbin Burns. We still have Gallen, Kelly, and Erod. Like, that's 6 other guys. I was bad last year, out of shape, and the owner hates me. Like, yeah, I have to make sure I do everything I can this offseason to earn back the trust of the fans and to earn my spot in the rotation. That's what we wanted Jordan Montgomery to say. That's what he should have said, because his spot should not be guaranteed coming off the season he just had. Just because he's getting paid does not mean anything, because no one out there from the current market, it seems like they even want the services of Jordan Montgomery. And we saw Monty come out the bullpen last year because he was so bad. And so those kind of comments kind of rub me the wrong way, because as a professional athlete, you should never feel like your spot is guaranteed, especially when you're coming off a very disappointing season by your standards, because you were overweight. You look like you're overpaid now. The fans didn't like you. Your ownership didn't like you. And it's like, we might squeeze out dudes from the rotation like Ryan Nelson, who was just straight up better than you last year. If you were Jordan Montgomery, you might not feel like your job is up for grabs because of your salary, but based off your play and the comments from your own owner, I would say your job security is not exactly secure. Now, discussing that rotation, there has been comments about whether or not the D-backs should go with a 6-man rotation. So we'll discuss if they should in segment number 3.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel is the app that is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Whenever the Suns are playing, give me KD over on 25 points, give me Booker over on 25, and give me the Suns money line. When it hits, which is not very often, it brings a big smile to my face. And if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, back here in the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss some comments we saw from Mike Hazen, because he is saying he does not want to see a 6-man rotation for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I was a little surprised by those comments, because I don't know if Mike Hazen can count, but the D-backs currently have 7 guys that could be in a rotation. And you're telling me we can't even fit 6 of them in the rotation? Because I'm like, where does that leave the rotation if we are not going to go with a 6-man rotation? Because Hazen says he doesn't like the extra rest days, I guess, for the starters, but like, or like the multiple pens in between. But like, no matter what his logic and reasoning is for going away from a 6-man rotation, like, I'm not saying he's wrong, but like, we just have too many starters right now. Like, yes, I think having too many starters is always a good problem. It's a great problem to have really good depth, but as it currently stands, the D-backs have more good starters than probably more good relievers, and it'll probably benefit us from trading a starter for a reliever or just figuring out what to do with this rotation. Because right now, if you're telling me Burns, Gallen, and Kelly are locked in, they are locked in 1, 2, 3. I felt like Pfaadt was locked in, but that's just me. Everyone is penciling in Erod because of the remaining years in the contract he has. So let's say that that's the top 4. You're telling me we don't have a 6-man rotation. So now it's Pfaadt, Ryan Nelson, or Jordan Montgomery in the 5-man rotation. And like we just discussed in the last segment, Jordan Montgomery feels like he's locked into the rotation. He is confident. He is not worried about his spot in the rotation. So now you're telling me Brandon Pfaadt, who is the D-backs number 3 starter on the way to the World Series, and who is improving, getting better. Like, I know we're focused on winning over development, but I still want to see the development of Brandon Pfaadt. And I think he's better than Erod or Jordan Montgomery. Like, in my rotation, Pfaadt is a lock over Erod or Monty, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. And then the other guy, Ryan Nelson, was the best D-back starter over the course of the second half of this season. And so if Mike Hazen and Toy Lavello are truthful about development over winning, winning over development, this might be a scenario where the development and winning is hand in hand, because Ryan Nelson and Brandon Pfaadt are both better than Erod and Jordan Montgomery. Now, if Monty and Erod bounce back, those guys are better than the best versions that we've seen so far from a Pfaadt or a Ryan Nelson. But I don't know if we can get those versions of Erod and Monty back. If we do, they should probably be the number 4, number 5 starter in the rotation. But as it currently stands, I like Pfaadt way more. He was incredible in the first half of last season for the D-backs. I thought he was going to at least finish top 10 Cy Young voting. He struggled in the second half. That's okay. But Brandon Pfaadt, moving forward, I still like a lot. And him versus Erod or Monty, Pfaadt feels like way more of a workhorse, way more durable. Erod has been injury-prone pitcher his entire career, and Pfaadt is showing that he's at least a workhorse. Jordan Montgomery, after last season, I'm not sure if I do think he's a great bounce-back candidate this year, but over the next 3 years, do I think Jordan Montgomery is going to be incredible? I don't know. What we saw last year, maybe the decline is true for Jordan Montgomery, and it's him versus Ryan Nelson, who is ascending, going in the other direction. It's just disappointing to see the D-backs potentially go with 2 guys coming off really disappointing seasons as opposed to the 2 youngsters. And again, give me at least a 6-man rotation, because then I can have Monty, Pfaadt, and Erod all in the rotation, and then I can at least bring Ryan Nelson out the bullpen as a spot starter long reliever. I think that makes sense. But having Ryan Nelson and Brandon Pfaadt both come out the bullpen, it just doesn't seem like it would make a lot of sense for me. I guess one could be in that Bryce Jarvis role. Another one could be that long reliever spot starter for the D-backs. But I just think I would like both of them in my rotation, at least one of them in my rotation if it's a 6-man rotation. But it just does not feel like the D-backs are going to do that. And so if they're not going to do that, you either have to put Brandon Pfaadt and Ryan Nelson in the bullpen, or Mike Hazen has to make a trade before the season starts. I think it would be very smart for Hazen to do that. It's not like we still don't have decent rotation depth, even if you traded Monty or Erod. Yolbert Diaz showed us a little something last year. Blake Walston, Christian Mena, there's still decent starting options if the D-backs wanted to trade away an Erod or a Monty, because let's face it, at this point, I think you have to, and of course, it seems like Monty's a more likely guy, being an expiring contract, seeing like he seems less ingratiated with the ownership, despite Erod also being bad last year. Jordan Montgomery seemed to really, for some reason, rub the front office the wrong way. And so if we're not going to do a 6-man rotation, I think we have to trade a Jordan Montgomery away and clear up a rotation spot. And then if you do that, D-backs just have to do a 6-man rotation. If you trade a Erod or Monty, if you only trade one member from the rotation, why wouldn't you go with a 6-man rotation? It's there. It's clearly the smartest move for the D-backs to make. I'm not usually a fan of a 6-man rotation, but when you have so many guys this talented that are this close to each other as well in terms of what their production output can be, I think it's the smartest move for the D-backs, but it doesn't seem like they'll do that. So we'll see over the next few weeks if they decide to split up that rotation at all. Jordan Montgomery is the most likely guy to be traded, but if the D-backs want to go really crazy, go big fish hunting, then you put Brandon Pfaadt or Ryan Nelson on the block. I don't think the D-backs will do that. All I want the D-backs to do, if they stand pat, at least give me a 6-man rotation. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy.